something that happened to me. Now, my wife and I have been married for 47 years. She would have loved to have come on this trip, but it wasn't possible. But our children are all grown, and we had the opportunity to babysit one of our grandchildren, one of our son's grandchildren, or child. And I believe their daughter was like 2, maybe 2.5 when they came to our home. And they wanted to get away for several days so that they could celebrate their anniversary. And we said, yeah, we'll be glad to do that. And they gave us complete freedom in how to, if we needed the discipline, we could. And so they walked out the door just as we were going to sit down to lunch. And our granddaughter was in a baby chair, and she began playing in her food and dropping her food on the floor. And I said her name, and I said, Kendra, or Kenneth, no. We will not tolerate that. I don't want you throwing your food on the floor, and I want you to eat with your fork. And she was old enough to do it. And so she's looking at me, and she goes like this. And so I picked her up. I obviously I didn't say anything to her. There was no anger perceived in my comments. I wasn't angry. I really wasn't. The way we get angry is when we say do this and they don't do it, and then your volume gets a little higher, and then they don't do it, and then your volume gets a little higher, and they know exactly at what decimal level they need to obey. And we're training them to do that. We're training them to be disobedient 3 times before they know mom and dad are serious about it. Well, anyway, I just picked her up, held her close to me in my arms. We went upstairs, and I sat her down in my lap, facing me, and I said, Kenna, you disobeyed Grandpa down there. I told you not to drop your food on the floor, and you're not to play in your food, you're just to use your fork, put it in your mouth. And I said, I love you, but I can't let you continue to do that because it's wrong. It's not Christ-like behavior, and we want you to know God. We want you to know how He wants us to change and grow. She's not a believer, and I didn't expect her. I'm not necessarily expecting her to get saved at that point. I just want her to know that God says to obey your authorities. And I said, you didn't obey it, Grandma. And so I'm going to need to spank you. And so I spanked her, and I made it a memorable experience. But as soon as I spanked her, I pulled her up into my arms, and I just cradled her there. She cried a little bit, and I told her, I love you. I want you to be a godly woman someday. And then I asked her, what did you do that was wrong? And she said, well, I dropped my food. Well, actually, the first time, she would just repeat after me, what did you do that was wrong? And it was a way of avoiding the conversation. And so I said, no, I won't let you repeat after me anymore. And I said, you need to tell me what's wrong, what you did that was wrong. So she told me, and then we prayed together, and we went out of the bedroom happy. She was just happy. It was all taken care of. I took her back downstairs. I put her in a high chair, and I said, now, eat your food. Don't throw it on the floor. And she looked at me, and she dropped it on the floor again. I repeated the same thing. I just lifted her up out of the chair. I took her upstairs, and I went through the entire process and we went over it. What did you do that was wrong? And I said it to her in this tone. And Grandpa loves you if you're doing wrong, and God's given me the authority and the responsibility to help you to change. And so I can't let you get by with that. I would be sinning if I let you get by with that. And so I spanked her again. And she cried. And I held her up in my arms, and I told her I love her. I rocked her there for a minute, and then I put her back on my lap, and I said, does Grandpa love you? She said, yes, you do. And so we prayed together. She asked God, I had her pray as well, and asked God's forgiveness as best she could. And then we went back downstairs, and I put her in her high chair. And she dropped it on the floor again. I took her back upstairs, went through the exact same thing, and prayed with her at the end, and we went out happy. We went downstairs, and she took her fork and began feeding her food. Her food was gone in a minute. She didn't throw one thing on the floor. And I had her for 4 days, and for those 4 days, I never had to spank her again. And every time, like one time she was out on the deck, and I said, now don't go down the stairs.